Captain.
Shut it down! If we don't shut it down! This is the first of our Title VI civil rights complaints that we're going to drop today. 3 cities. Newark, New Jersey, Brick City. Chicago, Illinois, y'all know it's Chirac. And New Orleans. In all 3 of those cities have been massive civil rights violations. And we done played nice. We gone to every meeting they told us to go to, haven't we? Yeah. Every school closes here, but they made their decision anyway, haven't we? Yeah. Right. If they don't investigate these, we're coming back with 20 cities. 20 cities, and we're going to make sure that America knows that this is not about bad teachers or children that don't want to learn. This is about a different set of priorities for y'all and children from other neighborhoods. We're going to tell the truth. Who's schools? Our schools! Who's schools? Our schools!
Good evening, my name is Deshaun Johnson. I am a 10-year-old activist from Chicago. My school is Marcus Garvey, and here's my speech. All right. We don't have the resources that we need in Chicago or all around the United States. And you know, do you want to know why? Because of Arne Duncan, the man that's sitting in that office. He is the reason why Chicago is bad. He is the reason why our schools do not have any resources all around the United States, and especially in Chicago. Before he came to Washington, D.C., he was in Chicago, closing our schools for no apparent reason, just making up excuses. And now, he's in that office doing the same thing, but all around the country. Is that right? That's why I vote to kick him out. Because how we going to have somebody who says they care about our schools when they really don't? On the other, they just back slapping you, just bow. Because they taking your jobs away. Because I can see all these bats in the crowd who are teachers, who stand up for their children, who stand up for their schools. That's why there's a reason that they call you bats. Now, what I don't like and what we really need in our schools are resources. What I don't like is that the Board of Education all over the city is saying that, oh, we want everybody to succeed, but we're not going to give them no resources whatsoever. It's just going to be, you need to do this without anything to do it with. That's basically like me saying, I want to play football, but I don't have no equipment to play in. So it's like they just basically don't really care about us as students and you guys as teachers. Because if they really did care, they would give us resources. They will help us get out of poverty. They will do all these things for us, but yet they don't. Because they're just greedy for money. Money, 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 money. That's all they hear. Just like with Walmart. Walmart opened down the street from us, and Walmart is the second wealthiest company in the entire world, but yet they're only giving their employees $8 an hour. Minimum wage. This is what minimum wage, people. $8 and some cents. And today we are going to see Arne Duncan's supervisor. Supervisor? Is that his supervisor? Arne Duncan's supervisor? Chief. And we're going to tell him what it is. We're going to tell him the truth, and we're going to hit him hard and knock him dead. And it's funny because how we're going to have Common Core if we don't have any resources? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. How you going to say, oh, you need to follow this standard, but on the other hand, you don't have no resources because we're not going to give you the money at all. does not make no sense whatsoever. If you're gonna give us this standard, which is Common Core is ridiculous anyways, but even though you're gonna give us this, how you supposed to give us Common Core but not give us no resources to work with or do anything with? The resources that we need in our school is like computer labs, computers, stuff to work with technology. This is the 21st century, people. Why don't we have these things? We still have old textbooks in our schools. Even in my school, you might hear that my school is so great, but in the inside, it's not really that great. Because in our budget cuts, we lost our 7th grade teacher, my 4th grade math teacher, actually we lost our librarian and our computer lab teacher. We have to use our counselor as our computer lab teacher. So how's she gonna do both jobs at once? And then we use the parent volunteer as a librarian. All we did was that year is watch her sit down and eat lunch in front of us while we did our work that the teachers handed us. That's why we need a librarian. So if you see this is what we need, they just don't give it to us. They don't really care. And that's the sad thing about it, because if you're going to run for office, run for the people. That's why we call Rahm Emanuel 1% mayor, because he's only about the rich. I still have my time left. And what I like, at least about our public schools, is that they're public. It's not a charter school. It's not a private school where you gotta pay money for a private school. A charter school might be public, but it's called a charter school. That's why I like our public schools, because it's in the community. A public school builds up a community. So if you close down our schools, you're closing down our communities. One thing I would like to tell Auntie Duncan is to get out of office now, because when somebody new come in, you're gonna be kicked right out the door. And now, too much testing. That's the big word. Too much testing. That's too much testing whatsoever. How are you going to give us all these testing? We do more testing than learning. At my school, at computer, all we do is test prep, and then when NWA comes, then we do that. But the only time, we're not even really learning computer. All we do is test prep for like half an hour, and then for the next 30 minutes, we do games. So that's not whatsoever. So that means I'm not learning how to type. I'm not learning how to do research. I'm not learning how to do anything, because how are you going to just give us test prep? That's all you give us, but yet we need to be college career ready, but yet we still don't know how to type, and I'm now in 5th grade. See, it's things that we need. We need somebody who cares about our schools. We need somebody who will invest in them. We need somebody who is hold on. Please, can I get the mans that bats we're going to give to the office? The mans for bats. Can I get it? I want to read it to everybody out here. Woo! Number 1. And all federal support for Common Core standards. Number 2, and all federal grants require teacher and school ratings based on student test scores and high-stakes testing. Number 3, now these are good ones, people, and federal incentives to close and privatize public schools, whole expansion of corporate charters. That's good. Insist on high quality teachers develop curriculum based upon knowledge of child development rather than narrow top-down test-based standards. Replace Arnie Duncan with a lifetime public educator and require that veteran public educators have majority representation of education committees. Number 6, promote equity and adequate funding of all public schools for all students with appropriate class size for all students. Ban all data sharing without parental consent in schools districts permission with full disclosure about collection and sharing for informed consent. Number 8, require all publicly funded schools to operate with transparency and accountability. Protect the free speech rights of teachers, principals, students, and parents. Number 9, and ties to Teach for America and support mentoring for new teachers as career professionals. Number 10, the big one. Restore the federal rights of children with special needs under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and protect the needs of English language learners. These are the rights that we need in Washington, D.C. and all over the country. Now, I want you to join me into this chant. It's called Ain't No Power Like the Power of the People, cause the power of the people don't stop. Say what? Alright, so this is the chant we're going to do. So join in when you want to. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Keep it going. Say what? Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. Ain't no power like the power of the people, cause the power of the people don't stop. You guys are great. And it's another chant. You might know it. Everybody should know it. It's a famous chant from Chicago that I did in one of my recently speeches. Alright. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. And it's some more chants. Wait, I can keep on going. And it's this another chant. Dang it. So this is the next chant. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. No offense to everybody out. No offense to everybody out there though. It's just like for the people who are in here and for the people around the state that just think that they can control our schools. Alright, let's go. Education is a right. That is why we have to fight. Education is a right. Oh, snap. Same chant. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. You are the best crowd I've seen. Y'all all are interactive and everything. Thank you. texting never ends unless you sleep with friends. Texting, it never ends unless it goes to sit with friends. How you take texting never ends unless it goes to sit with friends. That is a good one right there. Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming out here to hear all these wonderful speakers. I gotta give it up to the guys over there. They did a wonderful job. The students who danced over there, they did a wonderful job. I gotta give it up to everybody who spoke and sung songs. It was just a fun way for our first annual Bats March on DC. Bats March on DC. Yeah, so I hope we have one next year, even though I know we will. And what we do, we're going to come back with more people and be even more ready to take on Arnie Duncan and his office. Thank you.
Jack Frost, you do have beautiful teeth.
My what?
Are they really as white as they say? Yes. Oh, they really do sparkle like freshly fallen snow. This is an excellent example of what teeth should look like. Check out the iridescence of that incisor, the beauty of that bicuspid, the magnificence of those molars. And the best way to achieve such terrific teeth is brushing. 2 minutes, twice a day. Not 30 seconds, not a minute 45. 2 minutes. That's all it takes. They're beautiful.
You started school, elementary school, in Terre Haute?
Yes, at Booker T. Washington.
And that was a segregated school?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about that experience.
It probably, looking back, it was probably the best school experience of my life. All of my teachers were Negro. That's what we were called then. My third grade teacher was Jane Dabney Shackelford. She wrote the very first book very first book about African American history for children. It's called The Child's History of the Negro. She was my third grade teacher. My seventh grade teacher was John Wesley Lyda, Sr. He wrote the book The Negro in Northern Indiana. Those are the kinds of teachers I had. It was a close-knit community in Terre Haute. So if you misbehaved in school, my teachers just stopped by the house on the way home. And of course, back in those days, there weren't any child abuse laws. You know, we were whipped. And my grandmother would give you a whipping. She would send you out to get a switch. And if you got a little switch, you got whipped more. So you were afraid to get a little switch because that meant you were going to get a longer beating. So you had to pick a switch that she would consider appropriate for the occasion. But that's the way it happened. So whenever you saw the teacher's car in front of your house, you started trembling because you knew that this was not going to be a pleasant evening.
Well, did you inspire occasions for the teacher to show up at your house?
I stopped talking in school. I just couldn't stop. I just couldn't. I couldn't stop. I could not stop talking in school.
And was it because you were so excited about learning?
I have no idea what was wrong with me, because anybody who's got as many whippings as I did about it should have stopped. I mean, you know, at least big intelligent. I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop.
But you apparently did very well in school.
You should see my report card. I should have saved one for you. I have one there. All A's with F in deportment. I could not stop talking.
So you went from elementary school, and I understand ninth grade was when you
Sarah Scott. Then I went to Sarah Scott. That's when you integrated, at ninth grade. I had a
Now, why was that?
wonderful
Why was
eighth
that?
grade teacher.
Why was it?
I have no idea. It must have been money. They just couldn't afford the dual school system up that far, I guess. I have no idea. But at ninth grade, you went to the integrated school. I had a wonderful eighth grade teacher. This was a magnificent woman. Her name was Marguerite Taylor. And around the third week of the eighth grade, she told us she was going to teach us algebra. And she said, look, she said, I'm going to teach you this algebra because when you get to Sarah Scott, everybody there is going to know algebra. She said, and I will not have it that the only people who do not know it are Negroes. She said, I won't have it. She was a real different kind of teacher. If you didn't make an A or a B on her test, she would sit you down and she would say, how can you do this to me? Like you had hit her or something, you know. It was like you had personally done something terrible to her. It was not just your own personal failing, but you did this to hurt me. I had never had a teacher like that before in my life, who was so passionate about your learning.
And took it so personally.
I took it so personally.
Was it an effective approach with the
Well,
students?
for me it was. I can't speak for anybody else. But when I went to Sarah Scott, I was topping my class in algebra. I was so good that I didn't have homework. And my mother was the kind of parent, oh, you don't have homework? Oh, something's wrong here. So she took time from work to go to Sarah Scott. We walked, because she didn't have a car, and we didn't have car fare, and we walked all the way to Sarah Scott, and my mother went in there and asked them, why was I not having any homework? They said she has homework. She passes her homework in every day. And my mother said, well, where is she doing it? She's not doing it at home. And they said, well, we don't know. So my mother said, it's too easy. This class is too easy. I could have made my mother disappear. If the class is too easy, she said. Take her out of this class. Put her in a harder class. This girl is doing this work at school. So they put me in 9A, 9B2, right? My teacher was Miss Essie Howard. This was a big white lady with big red hair. And so she told me, she said, I understand you've been down there just skating along, making A's and none. And I'm saying, like, did my mother tell everybody? And she gave me the hardest work you could ever find. But she was a helpful teacher. You know, she was the kind of teacher who would help you understand. So I did well in her class.
Were there any adjustment problems in terms of being in an integrated situation?
No, because the white people considered us inferior. They didn't mix with us. They considered us inferior. You know, you're in our school, but we know you're inferior. I was going to be a translator for the United Nations after 1948. In 1948, in 1946, you see, I graduated from Northwestern March 28, 1947. So in 1946, you know, there was this vision of the United Nations. And in 1947, when I was a senior, it was coming to fruition. You know, it actually happened in 48. So my dream was to be a translator for the United Nations. That's what I wanted to do, because I was a Latin major, a French minor. I had taken French as much as I had Latin. You know, I was fluent in French, and so that's what I wanted to do.
Well, now, Latin is not the first thing that comes to mind when you think of, you know, pragmatic things to have a specialty in, particularly,
Right.
you know, as
Right.
a young
Right.
young black person.
But I was going to be a high school teacher. I was in education. So I was going to teach Latin in high school. That was what my mother prepared me to do. That isn't what I wanted to do, but that's what my mother said I was going to do.
You were going to teach in high school.
Yes, I was going to be a high school Latin teacher.
So when you you graduated from high school and you got into Northwestern
Yes.
largely because of the intervention of your mother.
Yes.
What was the Northwestern experience like for you?
Terrible. You couldn't even live on campus. You couldn't even live on campus. Black people, the only black person who lived on campus in all those years was the All-American Bernie Jefferson, who lived in Pearson Hall. No black people lived on Northwestern's campus until 1952. None. None.
So you could go to class, but you could not live on the campus.
Right. And then they didn't treat you well in class. We had a class in race relations. We had a class in race relations. And the professor couldn't tell the black people apart.
Oh.
So he couldn't figure out whose grade was what.
How could, I mean, well, that's
Hello.
That's beyond belief.
Hello.
That's kind of,
Hello.
yeah. He could not tell his black students apart.
Yes.
Were you making friends with other students? Was
Mostly
there
Jews.
Mostly Jews.
Yeah, because they were discriminated against too. They had a quota. Now, they were permitted to have a house on campus because they were, after all, white. But it was separated from the other houses. And that was the only place that they could live. So the Jews, of course, were angry about that, as we were about our conditions. So we joined forces and tried to change it.
I understand that you were part of a demonstration outside of the president's house,
yeah.
and your mother came.
Can you believe this? We were marching, you know, the Jews and the blacks, we were Negroes then, marching outside President Snyder's house, and I looked out to the west and I saw this familiar figure coming toward me, and it looked like my mother, but my mother did not drive. She never drove in her whole life. So, and my mother at that time worked at Great Lakes training station. You know, it's a long way from Evanston. And she didn't drive, so I looked, and it was the middle of the workday. So I said, oh, that looks like Mama. But I said, no, can't be. And I went on marching. My mother came up there, took me out of this line, threw my sign on the ground, told me, what is your problem? Marched me home, right? I'm exceedingly, not just embarrassed, humiliated, because I was the president of Quibblers, you know. And then all my Jewish friends were out there, you know.
And
Here's my
Quibblers
mother.
was, before we go.
The African American, of the Negro organization.
Okay, all right. And she had just snatched
She
you
just, yes,
out of the demonstration.
yes. And pushed me, you know, get out of here, you know. I was humiliated. I was humiliated. But I later found out that the Jewish parents came and did the same thing to their children, you know, and all the ministers, you know, because Northwestern's religious school, so the ministers' kids go free. So all the ministers' kids, the Braithwaites, Beverly Stamms, all the ministers' kids, their fathers came up there. Father Braithwaite came up there and got the Braithwaites. Father, you know.
How did your mother find out about that?
I have no idea, not to this day. But this is what I heard. She didn't confirm it, but this is what I heard. The president called them and told them that we would lose our scholarships if one more day, and we'd all lose our scholarships.
Uh-huh. So when she got you home, did she say anything?
Yeah, she said, I can't afford to send you to Northwestern. I don't have enough money to keep you in Northwestern. What is your problem?
So that was a very
That
pragmatic
was the
lesson.
end of that.
I guess so. That was a very pragmatic lesson.
That was the end of that.
So you
And she told me, when you get your degree, if you want to fight Northwestern, you have my blessings.
But until you get that degree.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated and immediately started working in the school system?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't go to the graduation. I hated Northwestern. I hated it. And I was not going to the graduation. It broke my mother's heart, but I was not going to do it. And I told her, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do it. So, you know, I'm sorry, Mama. I know how you feel, but I'm not going to do it. So she said, okay. And there are just some things that are not comfortable for white people. They're not comfortable for them to talk about the possibility that Africans were here before the Europeans. So what do you do with the heads in Mexico that you find at San Lorenzo, at Tres Zapotes? What do you do with those? All right? You ignore them. What do you do with Columbus's diary that says the Africans know a way to the west, but it goes around the doldrums, we would never survive? What do you do with that? You ignore it. What do you do with Balboa's diary that says we came upon this African village in the isthmus? How did these Africans get here? What do you do with that? You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth that the Europeans were here first. What do you do with all of this written literature and history that says that Abubakar II of Mali sent 200 ships to the west, and one came back and said they were afraid that the others disappeared? And then to have Balboa find this village that looks just like Mali, where he was, what do you do with this information? You ignore it. You ignore it. Why? To preserve the myth of white superiority. That's what our whole educational process is devoted to. What do you do with this whole history? This is a written history, my dear. Written. I'm not talking about hearsay. I'm not talking about a griot said this. I'm not talking about something handed down from one generation to the other through voice. I'm talking about written history of the Egyptians. What do you do with this? You ignore it. D.C. is not a good example. You know why? Because it's a colony. The people have no representation in the Congress. They don't rule themselves. They're ruled by Article 8 in the U.S. Constitution, and the president or Congress can veto any legislation in the District of Columbia within 90 days. I mean, this is a colony.
Did you know when you were invited to come in?
Listen, you know how you know some things, but they don't sink in? I knew this was a colony, sure. I'd read the U.S. Constitution. I knew Article 8. Yes, I knew it. But it didn't sink in until I got there. And then I had to go. There are 4 committees that rule the District of Columbia, 2 in the House, 2 in the Senate. One in the Senate is called the Committee for the District of Columbia, and then there's a subcommittee for appropriations. Those are the 2. And the same in the House. When I went to plead this, now remember, this is money that the people in the District of Columbia pay. Their taxes. These are their taxes. I had to go to the subcommittee on appropriations in the House and the Senate in order for them to tell me how to spend these people's money. The district is ruled by an invisible network of influence.
And you started to run into that network as you started to try and bring about change?
I was so stupid I didn't even look for it. Now that's a case of an educated fool. You know, my grandpa used to tell me, worry about that.
But you had very specific ideas about what you wanted to do.
I did, but ideas are no good if you can't implement them, right? And I didn't go about it right. I did not go about it right. An intelligent person with the education that I had should have gone in there and first found the network. And I had plenty of opportunities. I had plenty of opportunities to learn this. At 5 o'clock one morning, Senator Henry Jackson called me up and he told me at 9 o'clock, I want you to meet with a constituent of mine from Walla Walla. She is selling some kind of materials for school. I'm sure that you will be interested. Hello? This is Senator Jackson calling me at home and telling me, I don't care what's on your agenda for today. At 9 o'clock, you're meeting with my constituent from Walla Walla and you're going to buy her stuff.
And you didn't adjust well to that, obviously.
I did it.
Up to a certain point.
I did it. I wasn't going to defy Senator Henry Jackson. Are you serious?
Well, you did it, but you didn't perhaps do it with the expected humility.
Oh, maybe not, but I did it. I sure met with her and bought her stuff. You hear me? I was superintendent from 73 to 75.
At what point did you begin, or did you begin to think, this is really not going to work here?
July 1, 1974.
You remember that distinctly?
I do, because that's what I thought they wanted me to do. Please understand, I thought the main mission, I thought the primary reason for my selection was to decentralize the D.C. school system. That's all they talked to me about. These people were advocates for community control. Charlie Cassell, Hilda Howland Mason. These were all community control people with whom I had worked for a long time.
And so you believed that that's what their real priorities were?
In my heart of hearts, I thought that if I could do this one thing, they would love me forever.
And you realized that it was not, their primary concern was not necessarily better education for the kids. It was making sure that their top priority was not better education for the kids through the decentralization of the system. It was keeping certain people in power.
I don't want to say no. I don't want to say that, because I know Hilda Howland Mason was interested in the education of the children. Now, I knew her best of all the people. I know she was interested in it. This is what I think. I think they wanted to choose the people. I think they wanted to improve the education for the children, but they didn't think these people could do it. They didn't respect these people, and they didn't want these people. And I think that was the crux of the matter.
And was it that you believed that these people could do it, or that you could not get rid of these people?
Both. I believed they could do it, and I believed I couldn't get rid of them. I know I couldn't. I didn't have any money. These people couldn't be fired. You know, like they said, these people had seniority.
It must have been just phenomenally frustrating for you to be in that situation in a majority black school district with a predominantly black city council, board of education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like a phenomenal opportunity to bring about change.
It was. It was. It was a wasted opportunity. And for a long time in my life, I blamed them for everything. But I take my responsibility for it, too. There are just some things that my knowledge and my intelligence should have told me that failed. Just failed. And so I take responsibility for that. But I misread them completely. I just misread them completely. And it was one of the worst moments of my life. I believe that students should pass criterion tests. In other words, I believe that a kid ought to know how to read, and that he should be able to take a test at the end of some period and show you that he or she could read.
What was the matter with the standardized tests at that point? When you came in there and you were not in favor of those standardized tests, why not?
Well, at that time, I believe the standardized tests were culturally biased. I still do. But I know now something that I didn't know then. I know that you can teach children to overcome cultural bias. You just teach them what the test wants them to know. But we weren't doing that back then.
But back then, your feeling was that those tests were not relevant and were actually prejudicial.
Yeah, they still are.
And
they still are. You do better on those tests if you are European descent. See, because the cultural values are reinforced on the test.
Are there specific examples that come to mind in terms of?
Sure, what's the content first? If you just read through the content of it, the content first. Second, what the stories ask you to know about them. That's second. Because the questions are inference questions. They infer. Now, you know what an inference question is. An inference question is you get your knowledge to answer it from someplace else. Okay, where are you going to get it? If it's not in the story, right, and you're supposed to infer an answer, where are you going to get this? It has to come from some kind of cultural base.
How much of the distinction?
And evaluative questions, too.
How much of the distinctions have to do with a student's class, economic class, as well as race? I mean, does it have?
Well, they interface, unfortunately, in our country. Got more black poor people than you got white poor. I'm not more, percentage-wise.
Right.
There are more poor white people than there are black people, but percentage-wise, there's a larger percentage of black people who are poor than of white people who are poor. So in that way, it has a greater impact. I mean, it interfaces, race and class interface. You can't separate them.
So you ultimately,
Although poor people do worse on standardized tests than middle-class people. Because the more you know, obviously, the more you know, the better you are. I mean, if you're living in the Appalachian Hills of Kentucky and you don't get to learn anything about anything, then you're not going to do well on these tests. I mean, school can't cover all of that, you know.
At what point you were in D.C. for?
School can cover all of that, but it takes longer. We had success with the elementary schools.
The focus in terms of the new system, seemed to be that you'd sort of done a reversal from against standardized tests to figuring out a way to help poor kids, poor black kids, to pass.
Yeah, but I didn't know that when I was in D.C. I learned that in Pittsburgh.
You learned what in Pittsburgh?
That you can overcome the cultural obstacles in a standardized test.
How did you, was that simply through the research that you were doing all those years?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. You find out, I learned this from Louis Vincent and Doris Brevard. Doris Brevard was the principal at Robert Lee Vann Elementary School in Pittsburgh, and Louis Vincent was the principal of the Belts Hoover. These were the two highest achieving of the three schools that I studied. This is what they did. They determined what did you need to know to learn how to read. And they taught these children how to read as fast as they could. So most of their children knew how to read by the time they left first grade. That's a tremendous asset. Because what does that mean? They're not behind. It means they're not behind. So I think Mrs. Brevard had something like 91% of her children reading at grade level in grade 2. Hello. So my thing was, okay, how you do this? And what I found out was you take as much time as you need to do it. So those kids didn't have music, didn't have art, didn't have physical ed. Teaching them reading all day long till you learn how to read. This is illegal. Oh, you hear me? This is illegal.
Explain when you say this is illegal, what do you mean?
I mean, the state says you're supposed to teach these little cookies these
different subjects. So how do you get around the fact that it's illegal?
They just did it. They just did it. But what I'm telling you is, I didn't know that in the District of Columbia, that you could eliminate these cultural deficits that the test put up as obstacles if you had more time, because the school doesn't give you more time. You get the same amount of time to teach a kid from a different culture how to read English, standard English, as you do a kid who already comes from home knowing it. You get the same amount of time, the same, which doesn't fit. That's where the misfit is. You see where I was mixed up? The bias is not in the test, the bias is in the teaching.
And that's what your research showed you.
Right.
In Pittsburgh.
That's correct.
And you brought that knowledge and those changes here to Chicago.
Yeah, but I couldn't make them change what they were doing. You know, I couldn't make them change, so my principals who were successful, they did the same thing these principals did. They just skirted the rules. Look what happened to desegregation. We're 50 years into Brown, and we've resegregated. Why? Because white people don't like black people, don't want to live with them, and sure don't want to go to school with them.
And that's not good.
I mean, please, just deal with it. Deal with it. Decentralization didn't work. Why didn't decentralization work? It didn't work because there was not enough money to implement it, and taxpayers don't want to pay any more money to educate, and not, at least not black people in the center cities. So, you know, anywhere you go, but I don't even want you to deal with the what do you call it, anecdotal knowledge. I want you to deal with the studies. How about the study that they did at Northwestern, where the students sent out applications for jobs using names, black names and white names? How about that one? So Lakeisha Washington and Jamal Jones didn't get the job, but Brendan Fraser and Emily Walsh did? I mean, now how much clearer can you be that whiteness is important?
But then what do you say to a young black person in terms of, yeah, education is worth it, you gotta get out there, and the kinds of things that your mother used to say to you about get as educated as you can and you can beat the system?
It's not going to work. That's why these kids aren't doing anything in school. Don't you understand? They understand you're a big liar. And the other thing is, we're not doing anything about it. The preachers aren't doing anything about it. The teachers aren't doing anything about it. NAPC's not doing anything about it. NAACP's not doing anything about it. The Urban League's not doing anything about it. Why? Because the topic is politically incorrect and must be sanitized.
Even at the expense of their own children's education.
It is done so. That's what's happening right now, right here, this minute. We don't have the courage that our people had during Jim Crow. Where is the Ida B. Wells? Where is the Mary McLeod Bethune? Where are they? We don't have the courage that our ancestors had.
Why not? It would seem that it doesn't take as much courage to step out there and fight the battles.
But it does.
It does?
Oh, yeah.
Even though on the surface, at least a lot of young people seem to feel, things are, even young black people seem to feel, things are really so much better, and there's really not that much of a difference in terms of the way the races are being treated, and it really is a meritocracy, and it'll all work out in the end.
That'll come out in the wash. My son has a PhD in animal science genetics. He can't get a job in any university because they choose Chinese. Now, why do they choose Chinese? Because they're cheaper. Well, I have mixed feelings about that, too. In the first place, No Child Left Behind is the first time in our history in the United States of America that the government has said we had to learn to read. It's the first time. So I'm saying, welcome. I like No Child Left Behind for that. But the other thing about No Child Left Behind is it's unfunded. And I don't care what Paul Peterson says. It does not give you the money that you need in order to create the alternatives that it has prescribed for students who don't make it. It just doesn't give you the money to do that. For instance, in Chicago, we have no schools for a student to transfer into. They can't go into the magnet schools, they're test-in schools. You have to take a test to get in them. And there are not enough of the schools that are at the 50th or above for not enough seats in those schools for the children who need to transfer out of the schools that are not performing. So that's a big hoax. It's just a big joke. I mean, NCLB says it, but there's no money to do it. So if the option doesn't exist, then it's a hoax.
And it seems that
No money for tutoring. If you don't have any money, you know, and the states don't have any money. And
it seems that the administration is continuing to have to withdraw or change or modify a lot of the requirements that they had initially put in.
Of course, you're talking about highly qualified teachers. Look, teachers make less than plumbers.
Mm-hmm. So is your feeling that the program, that No Child Left Behind is something that is going to, I don't know, go the way of the dinosaur? Is it worth saving? Is it?
It's a worthy goal, but I don't think Americans want to pay for it. And that's not unusual. America has never wanted to pay for the education of African Americans, not even when they pitched us out of slavery with nothing. They still didn't want to educate us. The Freedmen's Bureau was set up to educate the slaves who'd been pitched off the land, didn't have anything, never got paid for all the work they'd done, never got anything for all the work they had done. The Freedmen's Bureau was supposed to educate 2 years, and it was gone. Bye-bye. Right now, you get jobs in America right now through kinship, friendship, and politics. And you got a lot of young people walking around, no jobs. Tracy, we shouldn't mention names. A friend of mine has an MBA, can't find a job. All right? She gone to California, and then she's gone to California now to look for a job. MBA. MBA. Okay, I already told you about my son's PhD. Okay, I can name you. I mean, you won't have the time to know all these people that I know who can't find jobs, who are highly educated and qualified. And friendship, kinship, and politics. That's what gets you a job in the United States of America today. Not merit. Not merit. Merit has nothing to do with it. Anytime a white man with a prison record can get a job that a black man without a prison record cannot get, and they have the same qualifications, isn't that clear? I mean, what kind of picture I have to paint?
Well, what do you say then to if a young black student in elementary school or high school that didn't have much faith in the system before in terms of, I'm not interested in this, and this is what white people do, and all that kind of stuff. When they hear this, what is to prevent them from saying, well, what do I need to stay in this place anymore for? Let me get out of here and get, on the streets and hustle some money or this, that, and the other.
That's what they're doing. I don't have to tell them that. I don't have to tell them that. That's what they're doing. Don't you see, my sister? Nobody has to tell them. These kids aren't stupid. They understand the name of the game. What we're not telling our kids are the nature of struggle and who the enemy is, because we're scared. Because we're scared. Because the enemy will take my job, and I can't pay for my Lexus. I can't pay my house note. I can't send my kids to college. So I'm not getting up and talking about that.
So let's keep quiet. Because the struggle...
And silence is consent. And don't you think that's wasted on these kids? That I'm hostile.
They see your determination to speak the truth as hostility.
And a lot of people will tell you, you know, she don't like white people, which is not true. My very best friend is a white girl, lady, woman. I mean, you know, she prays for me all the time, Dr. Margaret Harrigan, and she sends me inspirational messages all the time, and she's my good friend.
What advice would you give to young African Americans?
Struggle. Read Frederick Douglass. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never will, it never has. That if you want anything out of this country, in this life, you have to struggle.